All right, we are live, but we are not in focus. Let's see if this camera will work. See if it can get itself together. It really doesn't want to. Okay. Huh. Where is it? Oh, this thing does this. Let's try this a second. Hold on. Hmm. This is not working. Yep. Let's see. Let's take a break here. All right, we are. Okay, we are officially back. That now worked. Apologies for that. Okay, everybody. So, my name is Jason Sheftel, and I'm here to give you another update about China, particularly the real estate meltdown that is going on. You're going to see this all in the news for weeks, just like we've been seeing it basically since last October. This meltdown is really, it's taking its time, but we're going to get into it. I'm going to explain why this is really playing out the way it is and why it's taking a lot longer, why people have been saying for years this is going to blow, but it doesn't blow. Is there something we're missing, or what is really going on? So, right, just again about me, I'm a geopolitical expert, business consultant, finance, technology, all these areas. I try and help people understand where the world is headed and how they can profit from what's going on now. So that is a bit about me. This channel, I talk about all the things going on in the world to try and give people a sense of how we can navigate through an extremely tumultuous time. And anybody who enjoys this content, well, audio or microphone issues, camera issues notwithstanding, they should all check out, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and of course, Instagram. You can check out all of that out there, but for now, let's get right back to it. The issue right now is that in China, people think China has this really massive, really impressive, really modern economy, but the truth is that it's kind of like a lot of development stories all around the world, where you grow for a little bit, and then you see certain sectors of the economy become investment sinks. People just start pouring their money into these asset categories, whether it's because there's government subsidies to do something, whether there's a sort of financial push on the private side. It could come from all sorts of things. It could come from foreign investor flows. It could come from certain geopolitical or international tensions. All sorts of things can push investment and push capital into very unproductive areas that become bubbles that cause all sorts of problems. The most common one, though, since in the whole, you could say all of history, but really, let's just talk about the last 75 years, is definitely property. Doesn't matter if it's in Thailand or if it's in Japan or the United States in 2007, 8, 9, the first half of the 2000s. All of this is property. As property becomes, particularly residential property, becomes this massive sink of capital. It is not really an investment good. There's a whole thing about that, but property in general is really big. And in China, you can hear all you want about industry, about technology, about high growth, automation, space, robotics, biotechnology, all that kind of stuff. That's cool. But at least 1/3 of the entire Chinese economy is focused entirely on real estate, property, and the financing and all the other ancillary activities that go along with it. And you don't get to have that large of a real estate sector without some very, very, very weird things going on behind the scenes. And in China, what is, oh, am I? Okay, there we go, we'll be good. Yeah, and in China, the issue is really an incestuous relationship between developers, local governments, business, private, all sorts of private businesses, the central government, and home buyers. This is really a full nexus of every single part of the Chinese political system, political and economic system. It's really quite profound. Like if you haven't been to China, if you haven't really looked into the nitty gritty of how the financing happens, where the purchases come from, how all of it gets arranged, what the construction companies are doing, how they're related to the development companies, all this, all the crazy financial vehicles that are constructed by local governments, by shadow banks, by literally anybody, the whole thing. There's a whole world of this that is really dark. And what's happened is that this is one of the main ways that development happens. This is how the Chinese officials at every level, local, provincial, municipal, big municipalities, and of course the central government in China, this is how they hit their numbers. This is how they got the GDP numbers they needed to hit. They juiced up real estate, they juiced up primarily exports, a few other sectors, heavy industry, and this is what they would do to get the numbers they needed that the Communist Party wanted that kept it in power. That's cool. We are now living in a world, though, where all those things are disappearing, and the real canary in the coal mine showing us what exactly remains in China is definitely the property sector. The property sector in China is probably around 50, 60 trillion dollars. And this is a bubble, really a bubble like we haven't seen. I've gone through a lot of videos about what is going on here, so I'm going to just briefly go into what exactly we're talking about. But last October, the wheels started to come off. The government tried to cool the sector down because it had been spending at least 12, 15 years juicing it, and it's always trying to pull back, never fully succeeds. Whenever it pulls back in the market, basically growth starts to fade, real problems start to show themselves, and it lets things continue again. And that's what happened. So it started making some cuts on what developers could do, what kind of loans, ratios, all sorts of debt ratio stuff they could have, and almost immediately developers had cash flow problems. They started to go bankrupt, prices started to fall, real worries of consumer confidence appeared everywhere, and that was months ago now. And so this has just been cascading now. This has been cascading for close to 6, 8, 10 months, because it actually began before that. And there isn't really an end game here that anybody can see. There's real problems in the export sector because COVID is destroying the ability of the Chinese system to function in global export markets, global supply chains, all of that. That has become extremely difficult for any manufacturer to deal with. There's really no way to get around it. And also, one of the other problems you're having is the extreme controls on the Chinese population in order to get them to abide by the Chinese public health policies. All of them require extreme controls on how people move, how they interact, where they go, what they do. And this really pulls back into your home. Basically, you're trapped in your home. Many Chinese people have been physically, literally trapped in their homes. The locks have been remotely sealed and people have been left inside. So there's a real question about what is the value of all these properties? What is the value as the Chinese economic system evolves? And what about the Chinese demographics? What about all of the homes that have been built? Where's the real valuation here? I'll show you guys a quick graph. I didn't pull up too many things. This one is pretty good. So I think this is from Bloomberg, and it is, I don't want to move. There we go. So yeah, home prices. This goes to late 2021. And this is the sort of thing, this is what I meant when I was saying that the Communist Party had not allowed the sector to really have a business cycle to go through ups and downs. It was constantly juicing it, and there was near constant growth. This is home prices, so this has nothing to do with the volumes. This has nothing to do with mortgage levels. It has nothing to do with rates. This is just pure asset appreciation in the sector. This, I'll let's see if I can make this a little smaller here. But this, nope, it's not going to get smaller. Okay, yeah. So this is what you see when basically the whole global capital glut of the 2010s. This was flooding all around the world. It was hitting American asset valuations in cryptocurrencies, in tech stocks, in the whole U.S. equity market. All of that was being really slammed by all of these, this flood of capital that was hitting the world. And it was happening in China too, although it's super over-capitalized, hyper-credit, hyper-financed type of an economy. So it's very different. It's much darker. But finally, those prices have started to fall. The developers are failing. They all have cash flow problems. The Chinese government is now demanding that the main banks in China they're basically being forced to give loans to all of these developers. And this is an old story. It's really, really common. This is basically the answer to all problems in China is always to give more financing to whoever needs it to get whatever you need done. But we're way past the point where that is even a functional model. There's nothing in the real estate sector that needs any more credit at all. But there's not really anything that can keep these prices up, keep everything going, keep the asset values where they were when the wheels are coming off the whole global economy at the same time, and the Chinese economy in particular. So right now, data about all of this is being scrubbed off of the Chinese internet. You wouldn't be able to find most of the things I'm saying if you were just out on WeChat or basically anywhere on the Chinese internet. It's becoming pretty dark, and there's many numbers I could throw out about what we should worry about and what could go wrong. And people, go back 6-10 months, people were already talking about this stuff. But a really key one is just the $8 trillion in loans that are dangling, mortgages that are really dangling here, and you have to decide what to do. Like, the government has to decide how it's going to rearrange the liabilities, the assets, the ownership, everything in this entire sector. And of course, you're talking about hundreds of millions of people. It's way beyond the capacity of any government to try and reorganize all this in a tidy manner. It's way beyond what anyone can do. It doesn't matter. 95 million Communist Party members is far from sufficient to get this to what they would need to do. So now the key story right now is that home buyers are basically revolting all across the country. In at least 50 cities in China, they are refusing to pay the rent, refusing to pay mortgages, refusing to pay. And this is a real problem. This is where you start to get, and people are talking about how this could be easily like a Lehman Brothers type moment where you're starting to lose the funding you need in the system, right? So you can keep spreading financing and loans and credit throughout the system. That's cool. But if you start to lose the actual cash, like the actual hard currency that's going in from mortgages, and that kind of flows up the entire financial system, you're starting to look at real problems throughout the entire system. And the truth is, these home buyers really should be revolting. A lot of these developers, the whole system of real estate in China is really, really messed up. But people are buying properties for buildings that haven't even been built, that haven't been furnished, and they're paying enormous percentages of the entire cost of the property up front. So a lot of people paid for things that they're not going to be able to reside in, or for assets that don't even exist. They paid for buildings that aren't going to get built because a lot of projects are falling off the wayside. So what exactly do you do about this? Well, would you pay for an apartment that you're not renting? Would you pay a mortgage for a home that doesn't exist? I mean, these are the sort of crazy, this sounds like some weird question you get as like a hypothetical on an exam or something. This is really what's happening in China. And there's a lot more to it, but the gist of where this is going is that the net worth of basically the entire Chinese middle class is invested in real estate. This is the only major investment option in China that is really viable. For a lot of reasons, you can't get your money out of China. That was shut down about 10 years ago. You can't really invest in the stock market. It's kind of an insider's game, bit of a casino. You won't win there. And then most other asset categories outside of real estate in China are really limited, right? You don't have equities, bonds, all this stuff is not, obviously trying to do bonds in the last decade has been really brutal. And in the current rate environment outside of the United States, you're not going to really see a lot of motion there either. There's really nowhere to go. So anyone curious about this should check out a 5-part series that I did called Tales of the Communist Empire. It is really an awesome thing if you want to know what the Communist Party is about, how the system developed, and what it looked like in its end stages before it starts to collapse. That is a place to go. Final episode of that really talks about the property sector and its role in the final stage of Chinese political economy. It's a really big thing, and the key thing here is that when this paper housing wealth disappears for the entire Chinese middle class, hundreds of millions of people, the entire Chinese middle class will basically disappear as well, right? That is where the wealth was. That was it. People who don't know, there's people in China have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 homes. If you're wealthy, that was the asset class you were investing in. You weren't buying stocks. You weren't investing in different financial assets. It was really a real estate only game. And that was and you go down the chain, you go to people lower socioeconomic statuses, that's what they were also seeking for everything. Whether you're young, middle class, trying to get married, you need an apartment, whether you are trying to move into a different city, better city, whatever you're trying to do, the apartment, the housing wealth was really the core of everything. It's where all social aspiration was really trending. And so, you take that out, and you take out tech jobs, you take out globalization, you take out property. You're looking at a Chinese economy that is really grinding to a halt. All heavy industry is basically built out. There's no more super supply side construction that you can do that will actually juice anything the Communist Party needs that hasn't already done. So you can't really do any of that. And right now you're also looking at really terrible energy prices, and the entire Chinese food system is not just looking dubious, it's looking like it's precarious right now. So all of that together, you're looking at a completely different world, and the main pillar that really has its hand in every single thing is property. And so a lot of people for a long time have thought that the property sector in China would be the thing that the straw that broke the camel's back. Most likely, like 10 things are all going to happen at once, and to point at one of them is going to be a little much, but this is definitely going to be one of the big stories. And the key, I've been saying the key the whole time, but one of the big differences between what China is going through and what the rest of the world is going through is that where the rest of the world is experiencing inflation, China, if you remove certain layers of distortion, what China's actually experiencing isn't inflation at all. It's actually experiencing it's almost certainly experiencing deflation. So really quick, you got inflation, disinflation, and deflation. Inflation, prices are rising. Disinflation are forces that help pull prices down. And then deflation is a sort of structural collapse in pricing. And typically, if you're getting deflation, it's because parts of your entire productive universe are collapsing or eroding or becoming worthless. And the great example, of course, is Japan. Japan in the 1980s, the bottom fell out and it never recovered. There's a lot of reasons why. There's demographics, there's many parts to that picture. But that is where China is. The whole world is experiencing inflation, and China is in certain categories. But writ large, the bigger story in China is going to be mass deflation. And again, the scale that we can't really imagine. And this is really relevant for a lot of things, but for the property sector, it means you really can't get prices to rise beyond a certain point anymore. We're looking at Japan in the late 1980s, where, what was it? I think the value of real estate in Tokyo was like 3 times the value of all of the United States or something like that, or all of California. It was quite insane. And almost certainly Chinese asset values in the real property sector are exactly like that. They're not going to go back to where they were 2019, 2020, 2021. It is really time for a correction. But we have no model for what a correction like this looks like. The property sector is so structural, it's so integral to the entire functioning of the Chinese system that we don't even know what happens when this starts to break down. Deflation is really, really, really bad news. Once you start getting deflation, it means your economy is it's beyond where it can go anymore. And you have to start writing off everything. Japan is the best case scenario for where China and a lot of smaller countries are going. And that meant, let's say, 20 years of no growth and total stagnation. Japanese GDP today is smaller than it was in 1997. So it's actually never recovered from what happened way back then. And China is not going to be that lucky. It is not wealthy enough to actually ride this out. Japan had wealth, it had integration, it was part of a very different global picture where there were many economies that could actually support the transition of Japan into a sort of post-investment style economy. Now the whole global system is just going crazy, and that is not going to be possible for China. It wasn't even going to be possible for China because, well, A, it's too big, B, it's too poor, and now C, the system isn't even going to be there for it. So that's really what we're looking at. Real estate is just the start. So anybody who's made it this far, I apologize for that early technicality with the webcam. I'm actually really excited. I'm going to be getting a new camera pretty soon. This whole setup around me is going to be getting improved. It's really exciting. But real estate is just the start. We're going to see write-offs all across the real estate sector, but also industry, also agriculture. The real thing to watch is probably industry, where the industrial capacity in China is going to decay, kind of like we've never seen. There's no real precedent for so many factories, so much capacity, so much productive. You don't even know, for so much production to just fall away. And it's going to look a lot like what's happened in Russia, where the wheels are just coming off. They can't make electronics. They can't make basic goods. And we're going to see that on a huge scale when all of the forces that are really building up start to just take their final course. So I hope you enjoyed that. That was a quick video about where the Chinese real estate sector is going. Pretty soon I'm going to come back. We're going to have more videos on all sorts of great topics. And anybody who is interested should definitely subscribe to this channel. Check it out. Get notifications. The world is incredibly crazy right now. And you're going to need a perspective on what the geopolitics of this looks like, what the technologies you need to pay attention to are, which regions, which peoples, which skills are going to be really valuable in this changing world. It's all changing right now, and it is good to hear where it's going.